Let's skip the long, drawn-out intro. I'm going to explain to you why we need more video game remakes and remasters, and to do that, I'm going to reference something that recently happened to me. Something that caused me a great deal of personal stress. A few days ago, I finished going through all of the Legacy of Kain games for the very first time. Absolutely awesome series. You guys have been begging me to do videos on those games for a while now, and I'm happy to say that you won't have to wait much longer. I will say though that trying to play them was an exercise in cruel and unusual punishment. Not because the games were difficult, but because I couldn't find a copy of these games that worked. I wanted to play Soul Reaver first, right? Because I played a little bit of it as a kid, but I never finished it. However, my old PC copy was scratched up, so I had to buy it again on Steam. That was a big mistake, because apparently the game has an aneurysm if you dare to play it on Windows 10. I couldn't get a refund because I decided to play the game 2 weeks after I bought it, when the warranty expired. So I had to download a fan-created fix, which thankfully made the game run. But the problems didn't stop there. When I played it, there were audio glitches like every 10 minutes, none of the aspect ratios looked good, and the camera system was so annoying. You could tell that this was a game developed with the PlayStation 1 purely in mind, back before they had controllers with analog sticks. Thank God the story is awesome, because otherwise, I wouldn't have bothered. Now, Soul Reaver 2 would have to be better optimized than the first game. No? That's okay though, I didn't waste my money on an unfinished product this time. I decided to go the emulator route. I literally downloaded PCSX2 for the first time just so I could play this game. The problem is that the first time you try to switch between the material world and the spectral realm while using the emulator, the game crashes. And there doesn't seem to be any fix to it. So I was forced to watch somebody else play through it. Now, I can bear the process of trying to get old games to work. I'm used to it by now because I cover a lot of old games on my channel. But unfortunately, patience isn't a universal virtue, especially amongst gamers. Plus, many new gamers would probably ask why they should bother going to all this trouble to get these games to work, when there are newer games with better graphics, better gameplay, and in some cases, arguably better stories than Legacy of Kain. In response to that question, I would say that while there may be better stories, the essence of Legacy of Kain, the factors that made that game great, will never be replicated. It would be like trying to do a Metal Gear Solid game without Hideo Kojima's involvement. It would be like trying to remake Pulp Fiction without Quentin Tarantino. Sure, you might be able to make a good game or movie, but it won't be great in the same way that the original was great. It is for this sole reason that I recommend people try to experience the Legacy of Kain series in any way they can. Unfortunately, one's ability to do that has become seriously compromised, thanks to something that Sony chose to do back on March 22nd of this year. On July 2nd, the online stores for the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Portable will be closed down. If you're a console gamer and my praising of the Legacy of Kain games is making you want to play the first two games, you have less than 3 months to buy them. If you don't buy them, you'll have to resort to finding a physical copy on eBay, where you'll have to pay $40 for Blood Omen 1 and only slightly less for Soul Reaver. Moreover, the prices on these things will likely go up once their availability on the digital stores is removed. If that sounds annoying now, wait until your old systems break down and finding somebody to repair them becomes borderline impossible. And even if you find somebody, you know you'll be paying quite a bit of dough. After enough time has passed, the only option that will be available is emulation, but that's exclusively for PC players. In respect to the Legacy of Kain games, the most popular one is, obviously, Soul Reaver, with only 1.5 million people having downloaded the game since the release of the PS1 and Dreamcast emulators. Many of the people who downloaded this game are likely people who are pre-existing fans of the franchise, meaning less than 1 million PC gamers have tried to get into Legacy of Kain since it was available for emulation. To be frank, the legacy of Legacy of Kain is close to being forgotten, close to being lost in time like tears in rain. Millions of gamers the world over will never experience some of the greatest writing in the history of the medium, due to outdated graphics, archaic mechanics, lack of availability, and a solitary focus on what is new by both gamers and developers. Does this mean that Legacy of Kain and other games like it are doomed? Not necessarily. This is where the necessity of remakes and remasters come in. The Legacy of Kain games would benefit immensely from a remake. Unlike audiences back in the day who didn't support the series, audiences today are much more sophisticated when it comes to the types of stories they consume. If people can follow Game of Thrones and all its story threads over multiple seasons, they can follow the multiple timelines and Shakespearean dialogue of Legacy of Kain. It is also for that reason that I think these games will be more appreciated today than they were 20 years ago. The games have unique art direction which would look awesomely creepy with updated textures. Add in a better camera and, I don't know, maybe a Souls-like combat system, and you got yourself something that has Game of the Year potential. It would be a useful investment for Square Enix and Crystal Dynamics, and it would be less of a financial risk than putting forward a new IP. They would just need to follow the blueprint of the original series. Contrary to the beliefs of certain game developers like Electronic Arts or Activision, the desire for single-player games has continued to be expressed by gamers the world over, what with the success of games like Jedi Fallen Order and Cyberpunk 2077. Plus, the name Legacy of Kain is still recognizable. It's one of those series that most gamers have likely heard of, even if most haven't played it. If a remake was released to good reviews, I'm sure millions would buy the game. Beyond Legacy of Kain, there are numerous games that would benefit from either a remake or remaster. Obviously, whether to simply remaster or go full remake would depend on each individual game and how outdated the graphics and mechanics are. A game like Final Fantasy X can simply be remastered and millions will buy it because the core gameplay still works to most people's liking. In contrast, a game like the upcoming Nier Replicant benefits from the remake treatment because the combat in the original game wasn't well received, even by people who, overall, like the original game. In either case, the game would be available to a new generation of gamers. Now, in order to strengthen my argument, I read every objection or worry that my viewers had about remasters and remakes. I think I got everyone, but if I missed any, please make sure to leave them in the comment section below. The primary objection seems to be evident if we look at the poll I posted. Though 85% of people voted in favor of remakes and remasters, half of the people who voted said we should still prioritize new IPs. I understand this sentiment. In fact, I agree. If the market for remakes and remasters becomes oversaturated, there'd be no room for innovation. The games industry would somewhat parallel the current state of the movie industry, where all the successful movies are part of a pre-existing franchise, and new, original film only makes money if it wins awards. This is a very good criticism, and it is something we as gamers should keep in mind when we make our purchases. Even if a remake is good, like Demon's Souls or Resident Evil 2, it is still incumbent on us as consumers to support new original titles. If we do this, I believe it is entirely possible to have a healthy market for both new IPs and updated games. Also, there is an inadvertent benefit to having more remakes and making them monetarily successful. It would be another way to demonstrate to the studios the necessity of producing single-player games. Unlike many games nowadays that are filled to the brim with microtransactions and toxic communities, games from the past primarily centered around the single-player campaign. If the remakes and remasters for those games are successful, that would not only direct more money to single-player games, remake or not, but it would take away money from games with predatory mechanisms like loot boxes. The next criticism is a fair one, but it is one that I don't think entirely negates the necessity for remakes and remasters. Sometimes the remake or remaster just isn't very good. For every Halo remaster, there is a GoldenEye remaster. For every Black Mesa, there is a Warcraft 3 Reforged. It is very clear that in a lot of cases, there is barely any effort made on behalf of the developers. A lot of them are betting that they will make money no matter how much effort they put into the updated version, so they just don't bother. This is true. But it doesn't have to continue to be true. Gamers are much more sophisticated when it comes to what they purchase compared to the average moviegoer, for example. The prime example of this was the recent release of the Avengers game. The Avengers is one of the hottest franchises in the world. If Square Enix made a good Avengers game, they would have made more money than Jesus, Allah, and the Queen combined. However, gamers got wind of how bad the game was early on and didn't support it, causing Square Enix to lose tens of millions of dollars on the project. If we collectively continue to put pressure on game studios to do right by us, which continues to be easier and easier with the availability of the internet, then mistakes like what happened with the Avengers will minimize. This pressure would also help to ensure that when a game is remade, that it remains faithful to the original material. That way, the essence of what made the original game so great isn't lost. Now onto some of the more minor criticisms. Some said that nothing will ever compare to the original experience. Let's say, for example, that the rumors about Blue Point remaking Metal Gear Solid 1 are true. As awesome as Blue Point are, there's just something about the magic of the original PS1 title, with the PS1 graphics and PS1 controls that will never be replicated. I can understand that, but that is an argument exclusive to those who played the original MGS. Just because it won't ever be the same for MGS veterans, does that mean we should forbid future generations from experiencing something like MGS? There is a way to maintain the essence of MGS with new graphics and gameplay, even if it doesn't satisfy our nostalgia. And to put the lock on this argument once and for all, why don't we just advocate for remakes and remasters to include the original versions as a part of the package? That way, the game is still preserved in some fashion. You got a whole new way to experience the same game, and you can still play the original on the next generation of console. I figured that this would be the only way that a developer would re-release the old game, because otherwise, there wouldn't be much financial incentive to do it. Finally, I want to address this notion that some games are just so perfect as they are that they should be left untouched. To quote one commenter, "We don't repaint the Mona Lisa." I can understand why somebody would make this argument. To a lot of people, there are certain properties that are so sacred, so archetypal in their quality, that remaking them would be sacrilegious. This is why nobody wants a remake of Back to the Future, for example. Nonetheless, the Mona Lisa argument fails because of a false equivalency between how one experiences visual art and how one experiences a game. All one has to do to appreciate the Mona Lisa's beauty is to look at it. You can search a picture of the Mona Lisa online no problem and view it for free. Experiencing the Mona Lisa isn't contingent on whether you are able to pay thousands of dollars to fly to the Louvre in France just to see it. But in the medium of gaming, certain requirements need to be made in order to experience old games, be it the hardware, the software, or the gamer's ability to adapt to old gaming mechanics. It doesn't take much skill to look at a painting or watch a movie because all you have to do is stare. But experiencing a game requires hand-eye coordination, patience, and, in some cases, a willingness to spend hours trying to get good. One might say that gamers ought to get over the reservations and experience the original game as it is, but unfortunately, there is a difference between what gamers ought to do and what gamers will do. And besides, even if gamers the world over collectively decided to struggle past outdated game design, they would still need the technology to play the game in the first place. And those are all the reasons why I believe there should be more remakes and remasters of old video games. Let me know in the comment section what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know so we can keep the conversation going. What games would you like to see a remake or a remaster of? Personally, I would love to see a remake of either Silent Hill 1 or 2 with a better combat system. Yeah, I know what you're all saying, dream on. Please remember to hit that like button if you like this video, that helps me out so much. Until next time, just remember, as always, stay yellow.